Would you believe me if I told you that the most successful film franchise of all time is only this successful because of an assistant who used to sweep the floors and fetch coffee? Probably not, right? Well, it's true. Marvel is the most popular and biggest movie franchise in the world today. Its films have brought in over $22 billion over the years, and it's known in every corner of the world. Even other hugely popular franchises such as Star Wars don't come close to the revenues Marvel brings in, with Star Wars sitting at half that worth at $11 billion. Marvel is undoubtedly the king of the hill at the moment, and the valuation of the company being over $50 billion by Forbes certainly confirms that. But did you know there was a time when people found the company to be embarrassing and something for children rather than people of all ages? How did the perception of the company change? What made this happen? Well, it was mostly all down to one man who changed everything with the brilliant and innovative characters he created. And that man was Stan Lee. Though he is well known today for his cameos in everyone's favorite films and for the iconic characters he's created, not many know how the great man helped build Marvel's legacy and turn it into the giant in the industry that it is today. Well, today's video will tell you just that. Stick around and learn all about the late, great Stan Lee and how he saved Marvel from becoming irrelevant. In 1922, Stanley Lieber was born in Manhattan, New York City, to his Romanian-born Jewish immigrant parents, Jack and Celia Lieber. They lived in a small apartment on West End Avenue, and life was difficult, as his parents were struggling to find work. Jack worked as a garment cutter, and Celia was a retail saleswoman. Later, they had another child, Lee's younger brother, Larry Lieber. When the Great Depression hit, Jack lost his job, making it tougher for the family to make ends meet. Due to a lack of work and low incomes, the family moved into an even smaller apartment in the Bronx. As a young child, Stanley loved books and films, and was heavily influenced by the things he read and watched. As a teenager, Stan found his love for writing, and aspired to one day write a great novel that would be popular all across America. Little did he know that he would do so much more than that. Due to seeing his parents struggling, Stan developed a strong work ethic, something that would serve him well later on in life. During his teenage years, he worked a number of odd jobs so that he could earn some money and help out at home as well. He worked a number of odd jobs doing everything, including delivering sandwiches, writing obituaries, selling newspapers, and being an usher at the theater. Whenever he had any free time, he would spend it reading and writing his own little stories, hoping that all his efforts would one day pay off. And they certainly did. When he was 15, he entered a writing competition at his school, sponsored by a newspaper, where he won the prize 3 times in a row. This prompted the paper to ask him to stop sending his submissions, to give other kids a chance. The paper also told him to look into writing professionally, and Stan always credited them as being a major reason as to why he decided to become a writer. In 1939, at the age of just 16, he graduated high school a year and a half early, and with the help of his uncle, got a job as an assistant who had to fetch coffee and sweep the floors for $8 a week. But this is where it all started. Why's that? Well, the company he was working for was called Timely Comics, but it would soon be known as something else. For the first few years at Timely, Stan had to slog it out. His duties, apart from coffee and sweeping, included refilling the inkwells for the writers and artists, erasing pencil marks from finished pages, getting people their lunch, and the occasional bit of proofreading. Not the duties someone who wanted to be a writer would have wanted to be doing. But Stan stuck with it, hoping that one day all this hard work would give him the chance to do what he actually wanted to do. Right. And finally, 2 years later in 1941, he got his chance. The first comic he worked on was called Destroyer, a character he co-created with another writer at Timely. Due to the public perception of comics at the time being quite negative, Stan was embarrassed of the work he was doing and created the name Stan Lee out of his real name Stanley, so people would not connect him to the comics he was writing. But at the same time, his talent was beginning to be noticed by Joe Simon, the editor-in-chief of Timely and Goodman, who was the company's founder. Later that year, when Simon left Timely after a dispute with Goodman, Stan was given his chance. At the age of just 19, he was made the editor-in-chief of Timely. He quickly displayed that he was well suited for the job, and he proved so good at it that even though he was only meant to be editor for an interim period until a new one was hired, he was given the permanent position a few months in. But sadly for Stan, he suffered another setback soon after this. As just about a year into his new job, the US entered World War II in earnest, and he had to join the United States Army in 1942 and serve within the Signal Corps, which meant his career was put on hold, right as he had received his first big opportunity. While at war, Stan used to receive letters from the Timely staff with details on what he was meant to write. Once, when he missed the delivery of his letter, he broke open the mailbox to retrieve it, a crime that was punishable with imprisonment. Talk about being a workaholic. Even when at war, Stan was ready to do anything for his work. Luckily, a superior officer intervened, and Stan was let off with a warning. Once the war ended, Stan returned to Timely and his job as editor-in-chief. He met a woman named Joan, and they were married in 1947. They had their first child, J.C. Lee, 3 years later in 1950. Sadly, their second daughter, Jan Lee, born in 1953, passed away only a few days after her birth. This was heartbreaking for Stan and Joan, and Stan threw himself into his work to help deal with the pain. By now, Timely had changed its name to Atlas, and the business model they followed was one of quantity over quality. The books they produced were written to chase existing trends, rather than creating new ones. Stan wrote for a number of different genres during this period, creating work after work to help deal with his pain in the fields of horror, romance, mystery, and many more. But there was one field that Atlas had to slow down their production of at the time, and this was comics. Why? Well, at that time in the early 1950s, comics were coming under scrutiny, after many parents complained that comics were too violent and bloody for children to read. Even politicians got involved in the debate, and there were even hearings in the US Congress about whether comics should be banned. With all this swirling around, many comic sellers shut down their shops, and companies like Atlas had to slow down their production of the books. This again was a huge setback for Stan, as he was fast becoming dissatisfied in the work he was doing. By the time the 1960s came around, Atlas had managed to survive the negative perception of comics. However, very little of their original team still remained. By this time, Stan had been with the company for 2 decades, and he was seriously considering leaving them as he was tired of the work he was doing and no longer found it fun. He also felt like he was wasting his talent, as his ideas were constantly shot down and the stories he was made to write were not taking off. When he walked into Goodman's office to tell him he was quitting, he was given a new assignment before he could even say a word. But instead of quitting in rage, Stan decided he would do this one last assignment after hearing what it was. At the time, DC had just come out with the Justice League of America, and Stan's assignment was to come up with a fresh new group of superheroes to compete with them. While he was excited by the assignment, he still wanted to leave. Unsure of what to do, he went to his wife Joan for advice. And we should all be grateful for what she told him, because if she had told him to quit, Marvel would not exist today. Joan told him to do this last assignment the way he wanted to, without caring what Goodman or anyone else would think. As he wanted to quit anyway, it wouldn't matter if they didn't like it, and Stan decided to do just that. The team of superheroes Stan created was the Fantastic Four, a team of astronauts who gained superpowers when hit by cosmic rays. But while they all had powers and superhuman abilities, they were not like superheroes that had been created till this point in time. Unlike heroes like Superman and Captain America, who were super strong, handsome, and perfect in their intentions and values, this new team of superheroes would be flawed, having problems and weaknesses that would be relatable to everyday people. While most superheroes today have this depth of character, at the time it was completely unheard of, as superhero comics were still targeted towards children, which meant the characters all lacked depth. To help him create the comic, he enlisted the help of an old-time colleague back from the days when Atlas was still timely, the artist and writer Jack Kirby. Together, Stan and Kirby worked on Stan's idea and co-created the Fantastic Four. 1 year later, in 1961, the first Fantastic Four comic was released, and to Stan's surprise, it was an instant hit, with sales figures being the best Atlas had seen in years. And for the first time ever, older audiences were reading comics who had found superheroes they could relate to for the first time ever. This is where it all started to change. From this point on, having achieved some initial success, Stan now had more confidence in his abilities to create comics, and began experimenting with new and out-of-the-box ideas. After the Fantastic Four came the Incredible Hulk, which was again hailed by adult readers for its mature themes that dealt with anger and loss of control. Stan was now beginning to believe in himself again. With a new era of comics being ushered in, he convinced Goodman that it was time to change the name of the brand from Atlas as well, and Marvel Comics was created. Now, as editor-in-chief, and with his ideas having achieved success, one would think that Goodman would let Stan create what he wanted, right? But no. When Stan approached Goodman with an idea about a teenage superhero bitten by a radioactive spider who gains the power of a spider after that, Goodman told him it was the worst idea he had ever heard of. Goodman screamed at Stan, saying, "What's wrong with you? Teenagers can only be sidekicks, and people hate spiders." He ordered Stan not to pursue the idea anymore. While Stan reluctantly agreed, he could not stop thinking about the character. He came up with a plan to test it out. He asked the artist Steve Ditko to secretly help him create the comic, and then they published it in the final issue of a series that was about to be discontinued, as Goodman would not care about what was being published in something that was already being cancelled. This proved to be the best decision Stan could ever make, both for him and for Marvel. Every single issue of the comic was sold in a few months, and Marvel hit a milestone they had never achieved before. They had a bestseller for the decade. Spider-Man was a resounding success, and Goodman was forced to accept that Stan had been right. Even today, Spider-Man remains the most popular superhero ever created, and to think we may never have gotten to enjoy him if not for Stan's determination. With Marvel now making huge amounts of money, the owner Goodman decided it was time for him to sell the company. He sold it for $15 million to a businessman named Ackerman, but only under the condition that Stan would remain as head of the company, now as the publisher. Stan stepped up to take the role of publisher in 1972. From this point on, it was only more success for Stan and Marvel through the 70s and 80s, as the comic industry boomed, especially with the injection of collectors and comics being seen as collectible investments. Stan created a number of the iconic heroes we love in these years, including Iron Man, Black Panther, the X-Men, Ant-Man, and many, many more. More impressively, they managed to revolutionize the comic book industry by introducing heroes like Black Panther and the Falcon, who were some of the first heroes of color to ever appear in comics. They also used comics to provide messages of tolerance, understanding, and acceptance, while condemning war and bullying. Marvel was unafraid under the leadership of Stan to speak about topical issues, and many comics featured communism during the time of the Cold War, as well as criticizing the US's involvement in Vietnam. Stan made Marvel a powerhouse in this era, so much so that it could survive the collapse that was coming when he stepped aside from his duties with Marvel in the early 90s. Once Stan stepped away from his regular duties at Marvel in the 90s, the company quickly fell into disrepair, as it was in huge amount of debt due to its owners' foolish investments. However, Stan had built it into such a behemoth that it was able to survive this decade of difficulties and was later able to revive itself in the 2000s with the hiring of Kevin Feige and the building of its massive Marvel Cinematic Universe that brought the characters that Stan had created to the big screen. Stan himself, after stepping away from Marvel, started a number of his own private ventures, all in the entertainment space. These ventures include Stan Lee Media and POW Entertainment. He also wrote occasionally for comics, including writing a series for DC, where he reimagined DC's most iconic heroes called Just Imagine. However, what Stan will be best remembered for after leaving Marvel will be his iconic cameos in every single film of the MCU that released before his sad passing in 2018. Even in his old age, Stan was a lively, fun individual, which was evident from his often hilarious cameos he made in the Marvel films. An icon of the superhero and comic world, Stan Lee will never be forgotten for all he did. Just like all the iconic characters he created, Stan will always be remembered as a superhero, someone who pushed the boundaries of his field beyond what anyone expected. A symbol of what hard work, dedication, and creativity can achieve. And there we have it, folks, the story of the legendary Stan Lee himself. We hope you enjoyed learning about the man who created all our favorite heroes. If you had fun watching this video, smash that like button and leave us a comment down below. If you want to see more stories on huge brands and the people who created them, then hit that subscribe button so you will never miss another video. Until next time, thanks for watching, and Excelsior!